Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Forman, and we have a special edition Real Board Loft for you today where we are at Christenson Surfboards in California, and we're with Jon Peck, the general manager of Christenson Surfboards, also ripping surfer, and we're going to be talking about the Christenson Navitimer. Our warm-up, actually, you should know, our warm-up for this show is we just had 10 full servings of In-N-Out burgers, double-double, animal style, fries, all the ketchup you could eat, on top of a Christenson Cafe Racer.
Which you got to do when you're in California.
You have to, you got to do that. So now we're going to roll into the Christenson Navitimer and talk about this. Jon, I've had a ton of fun on my Chris Crafts, on my 11.2 and my 10.0, and I just can't say enough good things about those boards and the glide and the speed and just the sensation of how fast you're going, and actually that you are really going that fast too, and how fun they are, and actually also how different they are from like standard longboards.
True,
and
very
also
true.
just like kind of the misconception of what it is. Like there's so many people that don't even understand these boards at all. They're just like, is it a gun? Is it a longboard? Like,
yeah, what's the purpose of it?
What is it? So, but finally, I think a lot of people are catching on to glider style boards, and I think there's a lot of people out there that understand the Chris Craft. But this year, you guys released a new one called the Navitimer. So why don't you talk about this board?
So you can't talk about these style of boards like the Chris Craft or the Navitimer without mentioning Skip Fry. And Skip Fry hails from here in San Diego and is kind of our patriarch of San Diego surfing. And he, at a certain point in the late 90s, started to get real interested in riding glider type boards and really inspired by what Duke Kamanamuku was doing. And basically started riding these boards that were all over 10 foot, essentially, and made to just trim and go fast. So Chris, his old shaping room actually used to be next door to Skip's. So he was given a lot of the knowledge from Skip directly as to the design of these, and of course has put his own spin on them. We did the glider model years ago. That went on for a while, was very popular. Then we did the Chris Craft, and now this is the Navitimer. So the Navitimer is basically what most people would call a Fish Simmons. So Simmons, another prolific guy from LA, but also spent a lot of time in the Wind and Sea area and helped inspire what became the Fish. And so the Fish Simmons are basically long fish. And we do another model called the Long Fish, which is shorter. This is going to be anything over 9.6 essentially for the Navitimer. The Navitimer standard, different than the Chris Craft, features a swallowtail and thruster setup, which is different. And a lot of people kind of trip out on the thruster setup and what that's going to make it feel like, but it doesn't feel like a thruster like you would experience in your performance shortboard. This feels more like a single fin in the way it flows and trims, but it has a lot more built-in speed and allows the board to get on a rail easier than the Chris Craft does. So if you want a Chris Craft or a glider type board that can get on rail and do a full wrap, that's the Navitimer. That's what you're going to want to get. So, yeah. But basically these boards are built for both models, the Chris Craft and the Navitimer, are built for trim and glide. That's the main focus of this. You're not going to the nose. I mean, you can try. It's incredibly difficult because of the shorter fins and everything, but it's mainly for trimming and very minimalistic surfing. So everything pretty much comes from your hips and your ankles essentially, and your stance generally on these things should be tighter, not as wide when you ride them. So with the thruster setup on this, it does allow for the board to project and just come off the rail differently than the single fin Chris Craft does.
I mean, let's look at the thrusters. So the spacing on let's just, most people are familiar with thrusters on their shortboards, right? So is the spacing on these thrusters, the sizing, like what's different in these compared to like a standard shortboard?
It's a little different placement. It's a little tighter. It's almost like the twin fin placement in some ways.
Okay, so these fins are further back.
Yeah, it's all kind of back further.
So the cluster's
a little tighter.
Tighten up, okay.
Yeah, basically we do them all with marine ply fins, and we prefer glass-ons with them, but we can do them with boxes as well. Okay. But the marine ply, with these type of boards, and also when you're looking at things like your keel fin fish and things like that, there's certain boards that glass-ons just kind of make sense for, you know, and make the board feel complete. And so
Right,
that's why we kind of stick to that on these, unless somebody really wants.
Is that like an aesthetic complete, or is there like a performance
No,
element
there's
in glass
a
on?
feel to it for sure. Especially on a board like this, of this length, having them glass on, the base completely connected to the board.
Right.
The flex is maximized. You know, everything is the base of the fin is going to give you as much pushback as it can.
Right.
Whereas, you know, if it didn't, this much board would, if you had boxes, it might wash out a little more. But
Okay.
it's just a really solid feeling board with the glass-ons.
Now, what about outline? Is the outline on? I mean, if you take this part of the board off,
Yeah.
is the rest of the outline this
It's
similar to the Chris Craft, or what's going on there?
There's a little more curve in the outline overall.
Okay.
The noses are relatively the same.
Yep.
But there's a little more curve in here, and that again helps with the thruster setup, and also getting it over onto rail and kind of being able to come around a little easier. So that curve just allows you to bend around a little bit.
So like more curve, is that through the board being wider, or is it tightened up in the ends? Like how are you, or riding them shorter? Like how are you getting more curve?
Just in the outline itself, but
Okay.
the widths are relatively similar.
Okay.
You know, they're within 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of each other. So you're not really getting it out of that. It's more just the outline itself, and this thing just requires a little bit more curve to it.
Right.
You know, especially with the fins on the rail out here. The other thing that contour-wise it has, it's a little convex up here, nothing extreme, which just gets you planing and gets you moving down the face as you paddle in. And then it has a slight concave that actually runs down the center here into V out the back. And so this just creates a little bit of lift under your front foot and just keeps that trim speed up.
Right,
The Chris Craft actually has that as well.
Okay.
In it. Kind of a catamaran bottom, if you will, because you've got kind of almost 2 pontoons that run each side of the board
Right.
here. Yeah.
And everything's just like really subtle too. I mean, there's like nothing like jumping out at you.
So Chris doesn't do anything that is extreme. You know, I would say that a lot of his shaping is very controlled, and that he doesn't go too big with anything.
Right.
And which creates a very user-friendly board, but also an efficient board that works really well and paddles really, really well. You know, I think it was, in my opinion, it was Chris building boards like this that allowed him to then take some of these ideas into the guns and stuff that Greg Long and Ian Walsh and the guys have been writing for years at Jaws and things now, and being successful on. And a lot of that comes from the fact that these are efficient paddling, trimming boards.
Right,
and so that translates really well to paddling into a gigantic, you know, mass of water at Jaws or somewhere.
Right,
where
right.
you need to build your speed up to catch the swell itself.
So I mean, looking at the dimensions on this one, I mean, this one was made for you, right? Custom
This is
for
mine,
you?
yeah, this is
Okay.
mine, yeah.
So what's your height and weight?
I'm 6'4", 185 pounds.
Okay, and so this board is 10.5, 22.5
By 3.
by 3 even.
Even, yeah. And that's, I typically 3 inches thick on a board, anything over 9.5, 9.4, 3 inches thick is kind of where I stay at that level. Some guys would go thicker and stuff, but you really don't want to go too thick. And then with a board like this, and in any surfboard really, but especially in a board like this, as you add width, you're slowing the board down.
Okay.
So it might feel more stable, but you're also going to slow up the board by adding too much width to it. So it's something to be kind of aware of when you're ordering a board, you know. But you know, a lot of people's tendency when they custom order a board is to say, if maybe they're a little bigger guy, they say, oh, I want to get it this wider, you know, and keep the thickness the same. Really, you should do the opposite.
Okay.
Some kind of
keep the width stock and go thicker.
Yeah, because you're the volume of the board, not that we're big on volume around here, but when the volume of the board is much more affected by the thickness versus the width.
Right.
Because thickness is throughout the whole board, width is only in the outline.
Yeah.
So that, you know, something to consider when you're thinking through your dimensions and things like that.
And I mean, you know, after you surf this board or after you surf a Chris Craft, like you understand that a lot better. I mean, what you're talking about, like the width slowing it down, because it's so much the length of the board and the trim speed, and if the water's having to go around a wider board the whole way, it's just going to be slowing it down.
And also you've got more, the more width you have, the more surface area you have across the bottom of your board, so that's more that the water's adhering to and slowing you down.
Yeah.
So that plays into a lot. And in these big boards, you have a lot more surface area, so you want to be conscious of that. In your dimensions. But the stock dims on our website are always for a guy that's around 165 to 175, maybe 180 pounds. He's a good paddler. So if you're looking at the website, that's a good reference point to consider as well.
Another big thing on the Chris-Craft and the Navitimer is this hunk of wood going up the stringer, right? So what's up with the stringer in this
It's just a 3/8 inch dark wood stringer. This one was built with a US blank, milled here in California, but it just, a little weight in these boards isn't a bad thing.
Right.
So it just carries that momentum and that drive and trim speed up. So, but it's just a standard kind of 3/8 inch dark wood stringer, really nice kind of grain to it and everything.
And that's cedar?
It's not cedar, they call it dark wood now.
Okay.
The cedar stuff we can get as well, but it's more expensive. And this stuff we actually kind of like the darkness of this.
Okay.
Cedar's going to be a little bit lighter color.
All right.
For us, the dark really is what we want to see in our boards.
So a big part of what you guys put out there, in the surfing world is like your glass, like Moonlight glassing, right? So like your glass jobs and the tints and then the finish work, whether it's like sanded or wet sanded or the gloss and polish. So tell us a little bit about who glassed this board and like kind of the whole, obviously Chris shaped it, right? But
Chris shaped it.
Who took it to the finish line?
Chris shaped it, and then Noah Spear, who's our main laminator here at Moonlight, which is our glass shop, which we got about a few years back from the original owners, Peter St. Pierre still works for us as our airbrusher. But Nainoa did the lamination on this. He said, "What color do you want it?" I said, I think on my desk at the time, I was looking for a color, and my coffee cup had been on a piece of paper, and I said, "The coffee stain on this piece of paper." And he said, "Okay." And that's where we got this color from. So a lot of people have been digging it too. Every time I have this board in the water, they kind of are like, "What is that color?"
It's subtle.
It's very subtle.
Like a board for sure.
Almost looks like an old board in a way. But Nainoa did the lamination, and then Andy Poff did the glass on fins and hot coating of the board, and then it went to our guy Nick Rose, who did the rough sand of the board, and then on to Jack Baisley, who did the glossing of the board, and then Mitch King did the wet sanding of the board to finish it out. So that was the particular crew who worked on this board in particular.
And this board is a wet sanded?
This is a wet sand finish,
okay.
And now'd be a good time, I guess, to explain that too. So you've got 3 different finishes that we do. A sand finish and a wet sand. People get confused a lot of times. So a sand finish is what you typically see on your normal performance shortboard.
Right.
A lot of clear boards are going to be just sand finishes, which is just a hot coat sand.
Right.
These boards, when you get into tinning boards or they have heavier cloth, like Volan on them, you really want to gloss them to add a little extra resin, and then you wet sand them out. So glossed boards can have 2 different finishes, and that's going to be your wet sand or a polished finish, which is your real mirrored, shiny finish. But a lot of people confuse the sanded finish and the wet sand as to what that means. And basically, you do the wet sand on a gloss board that's tinted to get the color to pop.
Right.
Like if we just did a rough sand or just a sanded finish on this, it would not be the color would be dulled. It wouldn't.
And you would also see the sanding.
You would. It would look rougher.
If you had color in it, you would see the sanding lines.
You would, especially if it was a dark color. You would see that rough sanding that has gone on. Where in a clear board, it's not that big a deal. And also on a performance board, you're looking to save weight. So you're not going to gloss the board and put extra resin on it. So you're trying to finish it out lighter. But this is a wet sand finish. It's a glossed board though.
And you did a great job like describing a lot of this to me. It's like, when we started working with you guys many years ago, and you even went as far as saying like, hey, some colors are better in wet sand.
Definitely.
And some colors are better in gloss.
For me, there's 2 reasons there's two factors in picking your finish, really. And one is your color that you're tinting the board dark? If it is, yes, the polished finish is going to look better. You're not going to see, the darker colors, you tend to see any little scratches or imperfections. And polishing is a completely uniform finish to the board, right? Just like you'd have on your car.
Yeah.
Wet sand look best on these kind of icy colors. So it's where the color's not as rich, it might be a lighter color. The other factor that I always consider is what the board is, right? So if you have a egg type board or fish or something a little bit more, it's not a performance board, but it's something you do, you are going to put on rail and it's going to rip around a little bit more. The wet sand finish to me is kind of the way to go there. And the reason is that a polished board, water adheres to more because there is no break in the surface, right? So the water adheres and it slows down as it moves across that polished finish, which on a nose rider or something like that, it can be helpful. It can actually get the board to sit up in the pocket a little bit. On a board where you're looking for speed, essentially, wet sanding is the way to go because you've created these little micro grooves in the board, just like if you think about the golf ball, right? A golf ball has those little divots to break up the air as it's moving through it, and it allows it to go farther and faster. And that's the same kind of idea. And it's all theory, really, because I don't think anybody's really tested it, but the theory is that wet sands are going to be faster through the water, less lamination.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I was wet sanding my sunfish and my laser when I was riding my BMX bike to school.
Yeah, there you go.
And it was always faster.
It was always quicker, So it's just a little faster board with a wet sand finish.
That's awesome. Well, hey, John, thank you so much for joining us, and also thank you for the tour of
the
Moonlight Factory today.
For those surfing with you guys too this morning.
We had a great session this morning. So for those of you out there that might have questions on the Navitimer, on the Chris-Craft, or any of the Christenson boards, or you'd like to place an order, you can always give us a call at the shop, 252-987-6000, or look us up online, realwatersports.com/surfing. Thanks for tuning in.